Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Musically Speaking concert preview, where we'll be talking about Haydn's Creation, one of these great works that being presented this weekend by the Handel Haydn Society, so both on Friday and Sunday afternoon. Now, before we get into the history of it, obviously we are welcome with a couple of our wonderful special guests. Teresa is going to be talking about the history. As you know, she's amazing, lots of good stuff. But let's first start with Kate van Orden, who's a bassoonist. Will be playing the concert this weekend. Kate, thank you so much for being here tonight. Tell us quickly a little bit about yourself. And from what I understand, double reed runs in your family.
Thank you so much for inviting the bassoons to introduce the creation. And thanks for introducing me. Yeah, it's true. You know, my mother, who was a research scientist at the University of Iowa, in her spare time was an amateur oboist, and she started as an adult. And so she was, of course, very encouraging as soon as she caught any sort of intimation that I might be interested in the bassoon, because of course we could play together. But what's also interesting is that she actually really wanted to learn how to play the English horn and was told she had to learn the oboe, and then she could, also learn the English horn. So I think I was living out her desire to be in a lower register by playing the bassoon as a kid.
Oh, that's great. I think every bassoonist has a great story. So that's just really fantastic. And we're also joining us tonight is Damian Primis. And Damian is playing contrabassoon, which is, orders of magnitude larger than the bassoon. So Damian, as a cellist, as I'm a cellist, we walking around with a big instrument, people always look at you. So, my understanding is that bassoon was not your first instrument, that you also had a different instrument to start off with.
Yes, I actually started playing cello.
Yeah, good for
from
you.
the time I was 4 years old, and then eventually moved into bassoon. I find there's a lot of similarities between cello and bassoon. The register, how the sonority, and just all this, they're very close together. And one just kind of naturally progressed into the other.
And we're often playing the same lines also. I mean,
Yes,
this is
yes.
the exact same lines of music
Very
that are
true,
going on.
very true.
That's great. Now, for both of you, this is obviously not your first time playing The Creation. Damian, how many times if you had a guesstimate, how many times have you played this particular piece?
If I had to guess, from probably about 2010 till now, I've probably played it. There's a good chance I played like 50 times.
Wow.
I've played this piece all over the world. I've been on 3-week-long tours just playing this piece. So
that's amazing. And just to think, there are people who never get a chance to play it or even hear it. So
yeah.
It's really amazing gift. Kate, yes. How about you? How many times do you think that this has been for you?
Well, I have not played it as many times as Damian, but I might have played it before Damian played it. And I'll tell a little story, which is that it was kind of a thing to do creations when period instruments were expanding into large orchestras. So it was one of the very first pieces that I played on classical bassoon. And it was with my partner in this piece, Andrew Schwartz. We both played, and I think it was one of his first times on classical too, in 1988. In Chicago Symphony Hall with a number of the wind players from the Chicago Symphony, who at that time had the idea that they would all learn how to play period instruments as well, so that they could do all of the pieces in their repertoire on the appropriate instruments. And it was very ambitious. That didn't happen, but it was really very memorable.
Wow, that's absolutely an amazing story. Now, before I turn over to Teresa, my name is Anthony Trecek-King, and I'm one of the resident conductors with the Handel Haydn Society. And I always forget to introduce myself because I'm just so excited about this piece of music. For those who are on the call today, this is your opportunity to ask questions. So the Q&A chat is active. It's at the bottom of your screen. So if you have questions, feel free to use the Q&A chat. I'll be monitoring it, and we'll get to as many questions as we can throughout this presentation. Also, if you have any technical difficulties, a member of the H&H staff will be monitoring the Q&A. So just go ahead and feel free to enter into the Q&A if you have a question on technical difficulties. And as a reminder, this will be recorded and posted later on H&H's website, so we can come back and see it. So now, Teresa Neff, our resident historian, I'm going to turn it over to you now so you can talk about this great piece of music.
Excellent. It is a great piece. Thanks so much, Anthony. Welcome, Kate and Damian. I'm going to share my screen with everyone. And just a little bit about how Haydn came to write The Creation. And then we'll dive a little bit more deeply into just the beginning of the representation of chaos, the instrumental introduction. So The Creation was composed between basically 1796 and 1798, with Haydn focusing most of his attention on this work in 1797. The premiere, April 29th, 1798. So we're going to match that date with our first performance this weekend. That was a private performance, and we'll get to that in just a moment. The public premiere was not until March of the following year. But Haydn got the libretto from this gentleman, Johann Peter Salomon. His name might be familiar to you. He is the violinist turned impresario who invited Haydn to come to London in the early 1790s. And he brings Haydn to London for 2 trips, both incredibly successful. And just as a side note, for Haydn's first trip to London, that one from 1791 through 1792, one of the members in the orchestra who is playing oboe is a gentleman by the name of Gottfried Graupner. He will leave London, he will come to Boston, and Graupner will start a music store, he will give music lessons, he will start a symphony, and he will be one of the founding members of the Handel and Haydn Society. But back to The Creation. Salomon wants Haydn to come back for a 3rd tour. And so he gives Haydn a libretto that he told Haydn had been intended for Handel, but Handel had never said it. It's the English text to The Creation. Salomon's plan is that Haydn should take this back to London with him, this libretto. He should work on it there, back in Vienna, and he should come back to London for a 3rd trip. Haydn is a little reluctant about coming back for a 3rd trip. It's a long way across the continent and the Channel, and some of his Channel crossings were not maybe so pleasant. So he takes a libretto, he says he'll think about it. Well, when he gets back to Vienna, this gentleman, Gottfried van Swieten, who is a very good friend of Haydn's, a patron, he composes in his own right as an amateur composer. He says to Haydn, don't write the oratorio for London. I will translate the English into German, and we can perform it here in Vienna. And the deal that he gives Haydn is a good one, because Van Swieten is the founding member of what's called the Society of Gentlemen. These are a group of noblemen who pay a membership fee, and they sponsor oratorio and other kinds of choral performances. This is the group, for example, that commissioned Mozart to make the arrangement of Handel's Messiah for Vienna. They also introduced C.P.E. Bach to Vienna. So what Swieten says to Haydn is, we will pay you to write this piece, this oratorio. We will pay for all the expenses related to the performances, and you can have not only the commission fee, but all of the proceeds from any ticket sales. Haydn accepts this offer and begins working on The Creation. And he works very hard at it. And as I said, in 1797, he spends a great deal of his time really focusing on this work. So much so that he moves his house, his residence, closer to Van Swieten because they're consulting almost every other day or so. One thing that happens when Haydn finishes a passage or a scene, he will bring it to Van Swieten, who puts together a pickup orchestra and chorus and soloists, and they try it out. And so Haydn is kind of getting, real-time feedback, if you want to think about it that way. And so that's how a lot of this piece comes into being, with the exception of the representation of chaos. Haydn told a mutual friend that he purposely kept the representation of chaos away from Swieten so that it would be a wonderful surprise at the first performance. So with all of that in mind, let's turn our attention to just the opening of the representation of chaos. This diagram may look a little chaotic in and of itself, but we'll walk through it and then we can listen as we follow it as well. The creation opens with an amazing, loud sonority. The C and it's the full orchestra, and it's the full measure. It's also a fermata, which means you simply hold it. And so this is an incredibly attention-grabbing kind of opening. What immediately follows is the strings come in very quietly, and they are also muted. So they're extremely quiet. And you notice what happens is that they're holding long notes, and those notes are getting stacked, one on top of the other. Not quite lined up, but there is some order to all of this. And then this violin line carries on through, and all of that gets interrupted by another incredibly loud, full orchestral sound. This time, however, instead of just stopping and starting again, there are a couple of notes that hold over. And that's what these kind of triangles going down to the point are to represent. And then when you see what happens after that, we have things lining up in a more kind of, we might say, logical kind of way. And we have that same kind of holding of notes underneath. We have notes changing. But you notice there's one other thing happening here, right down here at the bottom, and that's the bassoon. The bassoon introduces a completely new rhythmic idea. It's the fastest one we've heard so far. If you notice, we've gone from really long notes to shorter, and then the bassoon introduces the shortest ones yet. And all of this creates a wonderful sense of things starting to happen. With all of that in mind, I will play the opening of the representation of chaos. And then, of course, this is just the beginning. You notice that other instruments picked up that bassoon rhythm, and we get another sense of things coming into a different kind of organization. But when that happens, listen this weekend for the bassoon because it will introduce yet another shorter rhythmic passage. And then all of those sounds we just listened to come back, but not quite in the same way. And then next we are introduced into Raphael singing In the Beginning. And this wonderful moment of moving from this open sound so full in the orchestra to something that feels like it needs to get itself organized. It sort of does, it sort of doesn't. It takes the rest of this opening for all of that to come into place. That's part of the reason I love this oratorio so much. Haydn gives us so many beautiful colors in the orchestra throughout. But it's the bassoon that I think really kind of kicks things off in the representation of chaos. And so with that in mind, I'd like to invite back Damian and Kate and get a performer's perspective on using the bassoon in such, I think, interesting ways. Kate, if I can start with you, this opening, I think, is really so fabulous. But is it the usual use of the bassoon in, Haydn or in late 18th century orchestral music?
Well, I mean, this particular movement is just extraordinary, right? So let's just put that out there first. And you've already said that. It's interesting listening to it played just now because, you have that big timpani drum roll at the beginning. And it was reminding me of the Haydn drum roll symphony that we played in January that also begins with this very murky cello and bassoon unison line that's quite long, actually. Whether that's a solo or not, I think depends a little bit on the conductor. Definitely Harry was thinking of it as a bassoon solo with the cellos kind of mirroring the bassoon. Sorry about that, Anthony, and other cellists out there. So, it's just a matter of color. I would also say this particular one, I mean, whether we're like some kind of primordial soup or something, there's something about of course, the range of the bassoon, but also, we have a very covered and kind of murky sound. And I'll just show, I don't want to give a really long answer, but the air in our instrument, goes down this side of the instrument, and then it takes a sharp turn here and comes all the way back out. And that gives the bassoon lots of overtones and a very particular sound that makes it often used for mourning, for sadness, for clowns as well. But it's very distinctive. And so I think Haydn's really reacting to that here.
Yeah, that's really cool. Damian, you get to play at a very particular moment for the first time. When do we hear the contrabassoon in this oratorio?
You know what? I don't play the entire opening. The contrabassoon kind of pops in and out of this entire piece at certain moments. I play a lot of the choruses with I double the double basses a lot. And then there's certain particular moments when he was just trying to get this sound. Usually it's a roaring of some animal or whatnot. That's usually when the audience can actually hear the contrabassoon, when I'm playing the really, really low pedal B flat. But in this entire piece, he actually writes, at least he allows the contrabassoon to be very active within the piece. Other composers kind of like just use the contrabassoon for certain things, but in here, he really lets you be a part of the entire piece, which is a pleasure as playing the contrabassoon on this piece. So, yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about your instrument? We got to see Kate's. I'm not sure we'd be able to see yours on the screen, but
I'll try to show you. We'll see. I've got to get up. It's a little. So, it probably won't fit. So this is a Tauber contra, and it looks smaller on video than it actually is, but it's pretty long. And it at this time they obviously didn't. The modern contrabassoon is just as long. It's just wrapped around. So this one just shoots straight up. But you still, like the normal bassoon, you have your crook. The reed goes here. It starts with this little hole, and it goes all the way through. These little pipes, comes back down around, wraps around, and goes all the way back up. So it's like the smaller version, let's say. It's just a lot bigger, but you still get those overtones. So when I'm playing those pedal notes, it's very much like an organ, like a pipe organ, and the sound that just resonates, even if you can't actually hear the note that's being played. Yep. It creates this base for the rest of the sound to build on.
That's incredibly
It's very cool.
Damian, you have to show them the E hole in the back, because I actually cannot play a contrabassoon because my thumb goes into the hole. My thumb is
let's
too
see if I
small.
can do it. So there's a giant hole here. And you know, it's funny with this, for certain notes, my thumb is partially in the hole, partially out of the hole. It just depends on how the intonation is. Because it's a very, you know, every time you play it, the intonation can be a little bit different. But it's the contrabassoon at its most basic sense, but it also allows for a lot of flexibility.
And you need to cover that hole for tuning purposes? Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, I have to play that. I have to cover that hole if I want to play a low E or anything below that, low E flat, you know. But sometimes I use that. I'll adjust my thumb if intonation has to be adjusted a little bit. Even when I'm playing some higher notes, I sometimes cover that low hole just to tweak the intonation in the air and how it's blowing through the instrument. Every day it's different. You don't know what's going to happen. It's much like the French horns, how they're constantly using their hand to change notes and whatever. I mean, it's not that crazy, but still, it's, you know, on these instruments, they're so fragile in a way that you have to constantly be adjusting.
Wow, that's amazing.
And everybody can see it. Doesn't matter where your seat is in the audience. Everybody can see this instrument.
That's both a good and a bad thing, right?
Yes. I'm not going to say I've fallen asleep before in really long symphonies. And it starts leading a little bit. No, just kidding.
Well, I'd love to see your reeds, because that's a whole nother world out there. You know, the bassoon reed and you know, the double reeds. And so could you both just kind of display that for our audience?
Sure. I'm trying to see the best way to display it.
Yeah.
So mine is pretty large. I think mine is probably twice would you say mine's twice as big as yours, Kate?
Like everything of yours is twice as big as mine. I mean, literally, my instrument is 8 feet long and his is 16 feet long.
Yeah.
It's literally twice as big. Probably true for the reeds too.
Yeah.
And these are all handmade by us, starting with tubes of cane. So
It's a long process.
Woodworking component to playing the bassoon.
There is. I always marvel at the knife skill of double reed players. That, you know, they always know how to sharpen knives. And you're right. There's the woodworking ability that you have to put into it. It's not just about the instrument itself and learning the skill of the instrument. You have to learn this auxiliary skill alongside it to in order to be able to play it.
Yeah, these are our vocal cords, right? I mean, this is what, that's what vibrates to make the instrument sing.
Wow, that's incredible.
It gets to a point where you're almost spend as much time making your reeds as you do, if not more time than you actually do practicing. Because if you don't have a reed that works, then the rest of the instrument is not very useful.
Have you? Okay,
or you definitely don't want to hear it.
Right. This is a crazy question, and I only know it from experience, very loose experience. As I was mentioning before, as we were chatting, I played oboe for a little bit, and I did not learn how to make my own reeds because I'm nowhere near good. But I had a good friend of mine, principal oboist in the orchestra, give me a reed, and it'd be one of her old reeds, you know, because she saved her good ones for herself. And every now and then I would just take the oboe and smash the reed into my teeth, and then the reed's gone. So does that happen to you at all? Or has it, I guess?
There's definitely been some accidents. No,
Yes.
I wouldn't say smashing my the reed into my teeth, but there have been times where, because the way that this pipe runs, it runs straight down. So the crook is actually upside down instead of other instruments where it's sitting on top, so it has some rest.
Right.
So there's been times that I've been playing and the entire crook will fall out. And I've smashed reeds that way because the reed's on the other side. Usually only happens when I have a really good reed on there. But
so insider tip, that's why we have little balls on our reeds, so that when they do drop, they drop with the ball down and not on the tip.
Oh, interesting. I've
Heavy
never
side
noticed
down.
that.
It's just to weight
Wow.
them.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. We have a question in the chat. The question is, what percentage of young people want to play the bassoon, and is there a summer program for young people? So it's a question is like the popularity of the bassoon as an instrument for choices when they're young. What would you say is small? Isn't it?
That's a tough question. Well, you know what I find? Well, obviously, when somebody starts bassoon, they're not going to start on a classical instrument, or I mean, maybe they will now. I don't know. But back when I was growing up, a lot of times it depended on what instruments were available in your school orchestra. If there's bassoons available or not, and bassoons, even the cheaper ones, tend to be quite costly. So a lot of parents don't necessarily want to spend $5,000 for their child to see if they want to play an instrument. But there was one available at my school when I was growing up, and one of our close family friends was actually a bassoonist, so I started taking lessons.
Great. And Kate, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, Damian's right. It's I mean, I also had a school instrument for quite a few years, and was lucky, great public schools and great public music education where I grew up.
Oh, that's great. We have another question in the chat, and Teresa, this is to you. And it was, how was Creation received at first? The first, maybe we'll go with first public performance, as we talked a little bit about the private performances.
Well, the private performances were so successful that they mounted public performances. People were standing in the streets waiting to get inside the halls. It was incredibly popular. It was played every year during Haydn's lifetime. He presided over most of those performances when he was able. And it just became such a huge hit. There's no other way to say it. When he published the score in 1800, he published it bilingually, so that it was in English and in German, which I think also helped really disseminate it, particularly here in the United States. So it was a big hit. That didn't last terribly long after Haydn's death, however. Kind of tastes change. Even by the time when he wrote the Seasons, the next oratorio, people were not so excited by all the text painting and all of that kind of thing the way they were with Creation. So, tastes were starting to change even towards the end of Haydn's life.
And would you say the popularity of the piece was the reception, I guess, of the piece was great when H&H first performed it, in the early 19th century?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Wow.
So H&H did part 1 on our very first concert. And then we gradually added the other parts until we gave the American premiere in 1819. So it was all kind of building, and it's all through. I pulled up my list here. I went through all the programs at one point and tried to count how many times we had done Creation, and we averaged at least one a year in the first half of the 19th century. Right? Didn't mean we did it every year. Sometimes we did 5 in one season and then we didn't do it the next season, but the average was really strong. And it was, when we started doing music festivals, it was the opening oratorio. People started calling it the Easter oratorio in Boston because we performed it in springtime and we did Messiah around Christmas time. So we had the Christmas oratorio and the Easter oratorio. So it was incredibly popular. Yeah.
Wow. And during Haydn's lifetime, do you think he saw 50 or more performances, or does Damien have him beat?
I think Damien and Haydn are neck and neck.
That's great. That was a great question from one
I'll
of our
take that.
attendees. That's wonderful. And Kate, one of our attendees, also was wondering about the public schools where you grew up. Where was these great public schools that had, a bassoon just lying around for you?
I grew up in Iowa, and yeah, just north of Iowa City. So
And Iowa is a great, if you want to learn music, there's great support for the arts there in the Midwest. So you're 100% correct on that. And Teresa, the performance that you were playing in your presentation, was that H&H's recording from, was it 2015? Because it sounded
Yes.
like it was.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
That was our 2015 recording. The last time we did Creation, part of the
Yeah, yeah.
bicentennial.
Exactly, which is just incredible that, back in 1815 was the first time that we performed The Creation. And then 2015 was the last time that we've done it. Now we're adding this new one. And I think it's really cool that April 29th is the date that happens to kind of fall on.
Yeah.
It's just so incredible. So we're running short on time, and I wanted to just thank both of our guests, Kate and Damian, for being here and for displaying your instruments. You get extra points for pulling out the bassoons. Damian, be careful not to punch a hole in the ceiling.
I'll try not to.
That's it. Now we have two performances this weekend, and we have a performance on Friday night at 7:30 p.m. and Sunday at 3 p.m. at Symphony Hall of the Haydn's Creation with Harry Christophers. It's very, very exciting. And there's a couple of extra things that are happening. This concert is featuring a partnership with Mass Art in their educational program, where students, their juniors, all produce art in response to Handel's Creation. And that will be displayed in the Cohen Wing, both before the performance and during intermission. So if you're going to see the pre-concert talk featuring Teresa right here, why not swing by and see that artwork that's going to be posted up there. It's going to be really cool. And you can also see the writings of the students as they kind of responded for it. So anyway, this was really cool. Bassoon it's an awesome instrument. It really is. Yes, it's comical, but it's also really, really great. And when we have the Let There Be Light, and there was light, and we feel the contrabassoon. You don't always hear it, but you definitely feel it, and those overtones are ringing there. It's one of the great musical moments that have ever been written, full stop. So definitely, come for the first 5 minutes, but stay for the rest of it, because the rest of it's also really, really, really good. So yes, that is it for tonight. So thank you all for coming and for being a part of this presentation, and lots more will be coming up very soon. So thank you very much. Again, my name is Anthony Trecek-King, and we have concerts of Haydn's Creation this weekend. So take care.